Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Riches Podcast. My name is Big Rich.
And I'm Gold Rich.
And today we're going to be talking about the incredible film director known as Mr. Christopher Nolan. And
he is now Sir Christopher Nolan.
Sir Christopher Nolan. I wonder who he's been blowing. So anyway, Jesus Christ. He's going to hear this and be like, I'm going to ban that name forever. Christopher Nolan, obviously now iconic filmmaker, has made, so I would argue, the best movie of the 2000s, which was The Dark Knight, or at least one of the best movies of the 2000s. Incredible filmmaker, now having finally won an Oscar for Oppenheimer. Our goal is to do a 3-part series just to kind of break down, the different periods in his life. Basically, it starts with the pre-Batman era, Batman era, and then after Batman era, post-Batman era.
The Barbenheimer era.
Look, people could say what they will. Barbenheimer fucking slapped. That was
did.
Yeah. And now you have, and then don't you remember like there was like some guy who like tried to like make like Saw, and like they made it released at the same time like a Paw Patrol movie, and then he tried to make, and it was like, come see your Paw trilogy or something like that. It's like, fuck off.
Ugh.
It's like,
and
it's
then
like
with Gladiator 2, which sucked, people were trying to make it like Wickedator.
Yeah, like
which Wicked's amazing. Gladiator 2, I had to walk out.
Yeah, I didn't watch either of them. I mean, I've seen Wicked. I've seen I didn't watch, I watched the film version of the Broadway production before, I think, for like a theater class back during my college youth days. But I remember Idina Menzel, I think, in that played the witch.
Yes.
She was I remember thinking she was very good, and her voice is really, really good. Anyway, so we digress. Hollywood being what it is right now, trying to find any way to like be like, hey, come to a movie theater and buy popcorn and theater tickets to watch theater movie. But look,
they're struggling. But
streaming services said what up, and Chris Nolan said go fuck yourself, because film should be seen on screen. I agree with him. That is why we're talking about him right now. Fuck the unoriginal, trying to replicate the same thing over and over again that ultimately becomes a deformed clone of what it should have been. Forget about that nonsense. Today we're going to talk about an exceptional filmmaker.
A true original. Christopher Nolan, baby.
A true auteur.
Auteur, indeed.
But so anyway, so Mr. Christopher Nolan, incredible filmmaker. Interesting fact about the gentleman: went to school, did not study film. He went there to study English Lit. It was through the Film Society there that he actually started making his movies. First movie he made on that list was Doodlebug.
Mm-hmm.
So, Doodlebug, short, independent film. Chris Nolan, basically, I would say this is like the film that kind of like validates Chris Nolan to himself, if that makes any kind of sense. Like, it's like one of those movies that he made where you go, okay, he loves film clearly. He wants to be a filmmaker. Takes the resources he has, which at that time you figure you're in college, you're getting college film equipment, which is a lot different than in the mid to late 90s compared to now, where the film equipment's much more ubiquitous.
It's actually pretty cool, because they didn't really have digital film cameras back then, so they were using actual like celluloid film cameras. Oh yeah,
actual like sitting like. The film process prior to digital, I don't think people understand what a pain in the ass it was, and how you have now where you can you can say, okay, we can do multiple takes, and of course at a certain point, for time's sake, we got to move on with the take. Back in the day though, it was like, you got to get this right, or we are going to be burning through film and it's going to be fucking meaningless.
But at least the editing wasn't as tedious in the 90s, because George Lucas introduced digital editing systems. So they were still filming on physical film, but they were editing digitally.
Unless you're Christopher Nolan, who actually legitimately still uses an editing, like an editing cut bay.
Oh shit.
He does, yeah. He still shoots with film, and then he'll take it to an editing bay where the editor specializes. And you got to consider too, like, most kids, like including myself when I went to Charter Tech, had studied using Final Cut Pro and the what's the Apple one, Movie Maker, I believe, or iMovie.
And then Adobe has Premiere.
Yep. So those were the programs that I studied. I actually think the Premiere I used was one of the first versions of Premiere.
Okay.
Which, yeah, Premiere is much more industry standard, I would say, compared to the iMovie, where, boy, did I love iMovie, because I could just, I remember making a movie in basically in right around 3 hours. Like, it was crazy. I would cut, I would already know what I wanted, so I would cut it all together. But that's shit compared to Christopher Nolan. Yeah, totally different.
But Christopher Nolan's early career is very inspiring for young filmmakers because he, like you said, he took what little resources he had and he did really creative things with it.
Yeah, and with Doodlebug, again, it's one scene, no dialogue, couple, cool shots of the young man in it, trying to catch whatever he's after, gets a phone call, shoves it in a fish tank.
Which I think that part just stood out as hilarious to me. Like, he shoves the phone in a fish tank.
That's right, because he's drowning out the noise. Yeah. So show don't tell. Aha.
Mm-hmm.
So the end of it is he catches what it is, and it's a smaller version of himself. And then a
bigger version is catching him.
Yeah, so it's, again, very much in the era of Nolan.
It's me that's got me.
Jesus. Oh man. But yeah, no, it's definitely it's definitely Nolan in the sense that there's a solid kind of twist.
Yeah.
/ it plays around with the concept of time in the sense that he's catching a version of himself that's smaller, then another one catches a version of himself.
Well,
and you wonder
that's not really playing with time, it's playing with space.
Playing with space, but I would also say
dimensions.
I would also say the reason why I say time is that you got to figure it goes on for infinity then. Because if he's catching that small... Yeah, because you figure if he's catching that small version of himself, then a bigger version appears, catches him. There's going to be another version of him you would assume from what you're seeing to catch him, and it's just going to keep going on and on.
There's always a bigger fish.
Always a bigger fish, always a bigger frying pan. So that should be in a kitchen, like a Red Lobster or something. But
oh my god.
But anyway, so now we move on to Following, which, to back up a little bit, prior to Following, talking about the state of film in the 90s. Now we have Chris Nolan making the jump from student short film to his first feature debut, Following. Also starring the main character from Doodlebug is the main character of Following.
Yeah.
So that also is another theme you'll see later on with Chris Nolan, is he likes to reuse a lot of the same cast and crew, which is, hey, look,
it's smart. If you like working with the person, work with them again.
Yeah, it's the phrase "not broke, don't fix it." I mean,
yeah,
100%. But so as Chris Nolan starting to wade out into the waters of doing feature-based films, you have to keep in mind in the 90s there was a big shift again with film where you see the rise of camera equipment becoming more ubiquitous, film schools becoming more prevalent on campuses, and then the rise of the film festival. Now, the big film festival that I would argue is the one that ultimately laid the path for Chris Nolan to walk down was the Sundance Film Festival. You had filmmakers come out of it like Quentin Tarantino, like Robert Rodriguez.
Mm-hmm.
You had Kevin Smith. You had Steven Soderbergh. You had, I believe, James Wan also came out of Sundance as well.
Okay.
Yeah, you have these really incredible filmmakers who come out, who they have a voice, they have something they want to say and need to say, and they ultimately create it and then, show it to everyone, and they, make careers off of it. Quentin Tarantino, very, very similar to, I would say, Chris Nolan in the sense that he likes to play around with the structure of his movies.
Yeah.
You start off with Reservoir Dogs where they're flashing back and then they're flashing forward.
But they never actually show the robbery. It's just before and after.
Yeah. So definitely, yeah, it definitely, it's definitely a good way to I guess in a weird way, save money. No, look, again, as much, it's funny we don't consider how much, again, it costs money to rent out equipment, pay your actors, get people there, have them fed and happy, which, boy, does that matter. Specifically coffee, I would say, is the big, the big one you can check off. So with this shift, I would say the biggest movie that kind of, you guys can do it, you guys can find the same level of success, notoriety, and both critical and audience acclaim, was Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction, totally disjointed narrative. You have the middle at the beginning, you have the beginning towards the end, you have the end in the middle itself. It's a really like cool setup to make a film that way. You ultimately find yourself as you're watching it asking questions like, okay, well, how was Vince the only one there, and where the hell was Jules at?
Yeah.
When he gets got by Bruce Willis's character. I'm blanking on his name right now. Anyway, Bruce Willis's character, who I think I think it's one of Bruce Willis's best roles. I think he kills it in it.
I could see that.
Yeah. Also, Chris Walken talking about smuggling his papa's watch out of his
and you'll carry this watch too.
Yeah, out of the war camp in his ass. Which, look, man, I can applaud determination and being a tight ass with ensuring that everything is seen through to the end. So you have all this setup of, audiences will pay attention to movies that are not just the straightforward
beginning, middle, end narrative.
Film structure. Yeah. You can show these unique, I think the term is touchstone style screenwriting, where you can start off at a point and then build back to that point. Like, you can tell different narrative styles, basically.
Yeah, that's where the whole, I guess, freeze frame. I guess you're wondering how I got in this situation. I feel like that's kind of how that came to be.
So that's the shitty byproduct.
It is.
I hate. I'm not gonna lie. Everybody feels different about it. To me, that's so cliche at this point that when you hear it, it's like, I'm not watching I'm not watching what you're selling right now. I'm not gonna waste my time. I just hearing that, I'm like, just rolling my eyes. So now after showing how narratives can be different, you can show these things to audiences and they will enjoy it and they can find intrigue in it. Chris Nolan could say, okay, now I can make a movie like Following, where it's a disjointed narrative. You have the main character who is a writer who follows his subjects around. The subject that he happens to follow, I guess it's one of the times where he just follows this guy, turns out to be a thief named Cobb, which, if that name sounds familiar,
Inception, baby.
Yep. Leonardo DiCaprio later will show up as Cobb, but in this case we have a gentleman who, his whole deal is he just breaks into homes, steals, and then, realizing that he's being followed by this kid, he pulls him aside and says, hey, let me show you how to actually do this.
Yeah.
And you go, clearly a dark mentor role, showing you how to break into.
And it's go ahead. I think Following strongly shows Chris Nolan's fascination with psychology, because Cobb is not just stealing stuff because he's like, oh, I can get a lot of money for this or whatever. Mm-hmm. He mentions a lot, you want to show people what they were missing by stealing these things. You take it away and they'll realize what they had. And he, similar to the writer, he likes to learn about people from what kind of things they have. He's kind of like Sherlock Holmes. He looks at a couple small details in the house and he's like, oh, these people are like this and that.
Yeah, definitely. Considering that a lot of the movies that Chris Nolan makes later on also have a similar, dealing with psychology as a theme. And also the concept of subjective reality versus objective reality.
Yeah.
Which is a big theme through most of his movies. Even elements of the Batman series has objective versus subjective.
Yeah.
In terms of how people view Batman, there's a subjective view of Batman, then there's the objective view.
He's a hero. He's a villain. He's a legend. He's a stressed out billionaire trying to make a good world for people.
Yes. Subjectively, you can, I believe it's subjectively you can view him as, hey, he's doing good, but objectively, considering the laws of the the laws of the land, which in this case here it's Gotham, U.S. He's breaking laws. He's undermining.
And you got people
authority.
saying shit like, "Does he really drink blood?"
Ooh. Random fact: Christian Bale does drink blood actually to keep his youth. You learned that on the set of American Psycho. So anyway, I digress. So following has a signature of Chris Nolan, which is a really solid twist. And I'm going to let Goldrich tell you what the twist is.
The twist is Cobb is not real. He was a figment or a creation of the main character, who is just named the young man. I think he was sort of a justification or an outlet for the young man to do these terrible things. He was so at odds with himself about doing these things, breaking into people's houses, and they mention him. They never show this, but they mention him killing an old woman.
Like something like that, where you go, it's not shown in the movie, but it's described, and again, you go to like, well, did that happen or didn't that? And you realize as an audience member, well, I didn't see what he was doing all the time. You know, there are these cuts.
You saw what he saw. That's not necessarily what happened.
Yes, exactly, and the whole thing of, you know, the cuts and jumps in time. You know, he's to some degree, you know, and even with the reveal of Cobb not being real, he becomes completely an unreliable narrator from that point. And it's, considering that it's the end of the movie now, you go, oh, so now I got to go back and question everything that I saw, because now I can't trust a word of what this guy has been saying the entire time. It's a good solid start for Christopher Nolan to say, hey, this is my calling card, this is what I do, this is my style, here you go.
Yeah, which I would overall describe his style as gritty, real representations of trippy concepts.
Yes, to some degree, I would say. Yeah, I would also say too, like, just the whole thing of being able to go to the editing room and say, so funny enough, with the Criterion Collection release on DVD, he actually did release a version that's straightforward linear, and most people who've watched it have said nowhere near as good as his original cut, because the original cut, he took this movie that would have been okay, you know, an okay solid start, but because he took the time to say, I'm gonna rearrange this story, you know, I'm gonna add some depth to it, some layers to it.
Yeah,
it recontextualizes the film, and now it becomes something that's actually special. It's different. It tells a unique story that makes you like go, hey, let me rewatch that to see all the details that I was missing. Now we get to, he's officially a recognized filmmaker. He's working on his next project, and his next project is actually based on a short story that his brother wrote, called Memento.
Yeah, it's that backwards movie.
So you have now him taking a short story from his brother, and funny enough, I believe his brother pitched it to him as they were making the move from Chicago, which is I think where they were living at for a time, and they were finally moving out to LA, because different from now where, you know, we are able to upload, you know, content and media straight to a computer. Back then it was you got to go to the mecca of where things are being done in order to be part of the scene, in order to rise above, you know, to actually get global status. And that place was LA in California for filmmakers prior to the rise of the internet.
Yeah.
And not the rise, I would say, let me not say the rise of the internet, but more the ubiquitous use of the internet.
Yeah.
So his brother pitches him the story as they're driving out to California, and Chris Nolan says to his brother, Jonathan Nolan, I like your story, it's really good, but I think one of the things that would really add a unique level and depth to it would be is if you tell the story non-linearly, or if you tell it in a certain style that's not how you have it set up, where you're describing it from a point of view of it being like this linear tale.
Yeah.
Whereas if you tell it kind of as like a switching back from past to future events, and you keep cutting back and forth with the past events being these like little interludes between the scenes.
But I love that the overall structure is it's backwards.
It's weird. It's backwards and forward. So There's a really great video online, I can't suggest more, where on YouTube, Chris Nolan, it's like an older, like, I guess he was visiting a school giving some sort of like colloquium, like, talking to film students about how they tell their stories, about filmmaking in general. He breaks it down where he describes the shape of the narrative as a hairpin, which is very unique. So imagine like the shape of a U, but on its side. You have a start and you have an end. But the start that's moving forward is being cut in between the main focus of the movie, which is this in-color story of a gentleman who can't develop short-term memory.
Yeah.
So he's trying to figure out who killed his wife. As he's doing it, you're seeing how he's like trying to figure out like how he's going to capture this guy. He's being screwed with by this police officer played by Joe Pantoliano. So the story itself, the actual plot is you have Guy Pearce, who plays Lenny. Lenny can't develop short-term memory. So he's at the mercy of what his previous version of himself leaves for his future self.
Yeah, which he writes notes for himself, takes pictures, tattoos notes on his body.
Yeah, so the big thing too is the use of Polaroid pictures.
Yeah.
And the movie literally opens with Lenny.
It's so cool. He takes a Polaroid and then he shakes it to like develop it, but it's like undeveloping. So it's like the footage of that shot is backwards.
Yeah, like instantly from the start you go, okay, what is this shit? Yeah. And especially too, like the whole thing of when he is watching the gun as it fires and it's going backwards as it's coming out the back of Joe Pantoliano's character's skull, this corrupt cop. You just know you're going to be watching something that's going to be different. From the jump, you're like, okay, this is not going to be your average story, your average dark modern film noir. Instead, this is going to be like manipulation of time, again talking about editing, being able to open the movie with everything in reverse, stuff that I really appreciate as a filmmaker, and especially from like the artistic point of view as well.
Yeah,
like being able to like know from the onset, like these are the calls I'm making when it comes to the editing and when it comes to the shooting. I can respect that as like a person who's directed movies and has at times felt totally aimless, but yeah,
but it is very creative, subversive filmmaking.
Yes, and it's also to the whole thing of just knowing the story structure going into it, and the fact that he was able to communicate it to everyone and not have them go,
what are you talking about?
Like, yeah, because the idea of pitching it to like a film studio to make is where I go, wow, he must have like went in and just drew everything down for him, because it's sort of a hard thing to follow unless you're really paying attention, which goes into another element that I really love of Christopher Nolan, which is he trusts his audience.
Yeah.
He does not pander to them. He does not think they're fucking stupid. He actually treats them as if they are engaged and they care about the story he's telling.
Yeah.
And we are, because the story he's telling is actually interesting.
Yeah.
I wish that was more prevalent in Hollywood. I feel like not every director takes that jump with their audience. Like, I feel like the only filmmakers who, maybe like Denis Villeneuve will occasionally take jumps like that. Like,
yeah.
Like in the movie Arrival, he takes like he
Arrival's so good.
Yeah, he trusts his audience to follow it. So when you get to the twist of the movie and you're like thinking about it, and you're like, oh fuck, like I'm not going to spoil it here, but yeah, no,
that's good. Watch movie. Arrival.
Yes, do watch Arrival. But again, anytime a director trusts his audience, that for me immediately is like, you immediately get like on a very good list in my head of, okay, this guy, I trust this guy.
Yeah. Because
he trusts me as an audience member to not like be checked out and be like, where's the explosion? Like,
Yeah.
Anyway, so the fact that he was able to sell this movie to a studio and the studio goes, okay, we'll make it, I guess. It's like, all right. I mean, okay. And then also too, being able to like, sell the idea to Guy Pearce, who does a great job as Lenny in the movie, Joe Pantoliano, who also stars with Trinity from
Carrie-Anne Moss.
Carrie-Anne Moss, thank you. So Carrie-Anne Moss, Joe Pantoliano, probably this was, I would assume that this was either just after The Matrix or just before The Matrix was when they went into production, because Memento came out in
2001.
Okay, so it would have been just after The
Matrix was 99.
So just after it, and they both do a great job. They're both shitty characters taking advantage of this guy who clearly has a disability, I would say. But but the guy even with his disability, he doesn't let it, like, he still is finding ways to, like, live his life, trying to put together this mystery ultimately of what happened to my wife, who killed my wife.
Yeah. But the reason he can remember that his wife was murdered was because in that instance, he got, like, smacked against the mirror so hard that he lost his ability to make short-term memories. So the last memory he has is of his wife's murder.
Yes, and as a way of coping, he tells this story, which is technically... So to try to break it down again, to the best of my ability, you have scenes that are in black and white, and you have scenes that are in color. The interlude scenes that are in black and white are the technical start of the movie, where he's on the phone telling this story to a person who keeps calling him about this guy named, I believe it's Sammy Jenkins.
Jenkins.
Yeah, he's telling this story of Sammy Jenkins about how he had some sort of accident.
Yeah, so Guy Pearce used to be an insurance claims guy.
Yes, yeah.
And he was trying to prove or disprove that Sammy Jenkins really physically couldn't make new memories, or whether it was psychological.
I believe the outcome of it is that he gets denied his claim, so his wife is sadly not only just stuck with a husband who sadly is going through this illness or this suffering, she now has to deal with the medical bills, and she ultimately says, you know what?
Oh, and by the way, she's diabetic, and she commits suicide by having her, can't remember anything husband give her multiple shots of insulin over the course of, like, a minute.
Yes, the short-term memory being taken advantage of to kill herself, which that's
a fucked up scene, because she keeps turning back the time on her watch, and she's like, hey Sammy, it's time for my shot, hey Sammy, it's time for my shot, over and over again. It's so fucked up.
Yeah, it's shitty. And that's another big thing in the movie, is you constantly see this character Sammy Jenkins, and then even Lenny, getting taken advantage of by people around them who know, okay, this guy can't, I can fuck with this guy to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Horribly messed up. Anyway, so it cuts back and forth from the black and white to the color. The color is technically the actual plot of the movie. The black and white are all flashbacks, technically. The movie itself, if you look at it from the hairpin point of view, technically the movie starts right, like, a little bit above the bend of the hairpin. So if you're imagining, like, a hairpin itself, the movie technically starts at the hairpin turn where you have the drug dealer dead, who Lenny thought, okay, this is the guy who murdered my wife. Plot twist. No, the drug dealer did not murder his wife.
Yeah, did not. Yeah. So Lenny's been traveling city to city with this crooked cop who's been letting him run around and solve his wife's murder over and over again, finding the wrong guy. And who knows how long he's been doing this.
Yeah, and you have it where from that point on, so the flashbacks are technically moving forward in progression. The color part, that is the actual plot of the movie, is technically moving backwards, and both of them meet at that bend where you learn the main thing, which is Lenny, has been killing the wrong people.
And he killed the right guy a long time ago, but because of his short-term memory loss, he doesn't remember. But all he remembers is he wants to catch his wife's killer, so he's kind of just, I guess, doomed to do this forever.
Yeah, he's like, and especially, well, I would say not. I would actually say no, funny enough.
Okay.
The reason why I would say no is actually at the very beginning of the movie, when he shoots the
Teddy.
cop.
Yeah.
Once he kills Teddy, that's it. Like, he kills Teddy, and now technically, while he has short-term memory, at least now he can tattoo on himself, hey, you caught your wife's killer, or he can add something to himself to say, hey, this is the picture of your wife's killer, he's dead now, which technically, like you said, he's been dead for a while, but the guy who's taking advantage of him, making him think that he's, the guy who takes advantage of him ultimately kind of gets what he deserves, which is he ultimately ends up as under the gun.
The quote-unquote killer.
Yeah, he ultimately ends up under the gun and having his head blown off.
Yep.
Which, that opening still, I'm like, God damn, that's pretty shitty.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing as well.
So it had a happy ending at the beginning.
Yes. Technically, it does. with that, Memento goes on, gets nominated for 2 Oscars, one for Best Original Screenplay, the other for Best Film Editing. Definitely the film editing, I would say.
Well deserved.
Well deserved. It takes... You got to figure Chris Nolan now telling his editor what he wants, and the editor being like, sure. Okay. The editor being like, you know what? Sure, why not? And yeah, so his editor, I believe her last name's Dorn.
Okay.
Yeah. She gets nominated for best edit. She gets a nomination for best editing. Chris Nolan, and his brother as well gets nominated because he came up with the story. Funny enough, an interesting fact: the story got published after the movie got released.
Oh.
So I want to say it was in Forbes that the actual short story was published in. The movie came first.
Okay.
And I believe again it's a situation where you read the short story. The short story is told in the traditional order.
Yeah.
The movie itself, told non-linearly, is viewed a little more higher because like it's so uniquely stylized.
Yeah.
That you go, it's much more interesting.
I think the overall backwards, I mean, it jumps to the beginning sometimes, but the overall backwards structure of it, I think, works very well with the fact that the main character has short-term memory loss.
Yeah, it's the whole thing. It's, again, going back to the theme of subjective reality versus objective reality.
Yeah.
Subjectively...
It's like you're just as confused as he is.
Exactly, yeah. Like, you're at the mercy of what he's seeing.
Yeah.
And because he's an unreliable narrator, you can't really trust anything that you're seeing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was watching a breakdown of the movie, and one of the details that I thought was interesting was the license plate on the car changes.
Does it?
It does. So you would think so one of the big details is the car and Joe Pantoliano's character trying to get it to the car so that he can get in the back of it because there's like money in it.
Yeah.
So he's trying to constantly get access to the car so he can get to the trunk. Lenny tells him to basically go fuck yourself and you're gonna like... So Lenny basically just tells Teddy to go fuck himself. You're not getting into my car.
Yep.
And, you know, that's what ultimately is the undoing of Teddy, is because he keeps trying to get into the car is... Yeah, like that's what leads to him getting shot.
So what came of Memento for Christopher Nolan?
Yes. So critical acclaim, audience acclaim, nominated for 2 Oscars. So with that, he officially now goes from independent filmmaker to making the jump to studio film.